that Heifetz really kept the standards of, and the whole idea, we'll return to that, what it means performance, and how to kept the level of your not only technical ability, your application to meeting the public, what it means to play for a live audience, whether it's recorded or not, meant absolutely no difference for him. It didn't matter whether he played in a huge hall, Carnegie Hall, or in the middle of nowhere. It was Jascha Heifetz recital. His standards were extremely high every time he appeared in front of the audience. He was always nervous, and because he was competing basically with himself, just to live up to his own standards. And this is something that unfortunately changed since he was no longer performing. He stopped performing in '73, and we will talk about the other two in a minute. I would like to play for you just the first page opening of the Mendelssohn Concerto by three those giants, and you have to guess which one is which. The next one. Last one. Tell me, students only, not my generation. Yeah, just students. Any volunteers? Yes, please.
I think the second recording I think is Heifetz.
Bravo.
The third one I think is Chrysler.
Wrong. The third one is Menuhin. First was Chrysler. But you see, normally as we go along and we hear more of their recording. This is in some ways that there is another test coming later on with Bach, which is quite surprising. But they all had extraordinarily personal sound. Of course, if we had, maybe this headphones, you hear more a sort of immediate thing. The problem is today we so often listen to things on iPhone or iPad or any kind of electrical things. It doesn't really convey the live performance because all that extraordinary, subtle and particular, qualities of the sound is best, of course, when you hear it live. But out of the three, those great giants, of course, I never met Chrysler because he died in the 60s. And I was back in Russia studying at school. I did meet Heifetz once in Los Angeles in '82. And I had a lot of times I performed with Menuhin, and I played for him for the first time when I was 8 years old when he visited Central Music School. So I knew, but Chrysler I have a very special connection because I'm also a first prize winner of the first Fritz Chrysler competition. So somehow my first album was also Chrysler transcriptions. I adore Chrysler all my life. I adore all three of them, otherwise I wouldn't put them together. But Chrysler was somebody very, very special, and we'll talk about him when I give you something of his typical recordings along the way. Now, the next three selections, the first one, in my opinion, is perhaps the most extraordinary recording of Yehudi Menuhin of all that he did. In 1938, they discovered, almost 50 years later, more than that, almost 70 years later, Schumann died in 1856, and somehow Joachim and Clara Schumann decided that his violin concerto should not be performed anymore. It was not the best Schumann, and the score was lost. It was lost, and then Clara died, then Joachim died, and there's an extraordinary story with Joachim's granddaughter, whose name was Jeli Darani. She is the one Ravel dedicated his Tsigan. Somebody, I think, is playing for me tomorrow or the next day. I think Tsigan, somebody is playing. So, you should know who Jeli Darani was. She was the granddaughter of Joachim. And apparently, they couldn't find it. They looked through all the libraries, all the archives. And she was doing the seances of spiritism. And she summoned the ghost of her grandfather. And she said, "Where is the score?" And she said, "You go to Düsseldorf library, you look under such and such title, and you will find it." So she did. She didn't find it. So she talked to him at the next session. And she said, it wasn't there. She said, "Let me talk to Robert." That means Schumann. And so finally Schumann passed on that it was misfiled somewhere, completely different name, and they found the score. So she made it first, in 1938, she made the first European premiere, but Menuhin played it and recorded it in the States. And that is, in my opinion, that second movement. When you hear it, it's just the closest thing to something quite divine. Let's see if I could get that in the right place. Let me see. The next thing should be wait. Yehudi Menuhin. Hold on. The next doesn't go here. Now my iPad is acting up. That's interesting. I just want to see the playlist. There we go. So, yeah. Second movement of Schumann concerto. Wait till you hear the violin. Now. And so forth. That is an extraordinary, I think, one of the finest examples. An old recording, obviously, the technique of recording in 1938 in New York with New York Philharmonic was not what it is now, but the sound is of such quality and the expressivity. He's telling you a story that just goes straight to your heart, and you can't. But you know, if there is a divine voice, that certainly is that. And this is Menuhin at the age of 22. And I believe that probably was the peak of his powers as a violinist. I played, as I said, many times and with him, and he, of course, I'm sure you've seen pictures of him, but if you saw his face, especially when I performed with him as a conductor, he was by no means a great conductor, but just looking at his face, he looked like a prophetic bird, somebody from the biblical time, There was something so special about that face. And all you needed to get inspiration, just look at him, because there was something. And even in his, later years, when he had all kinds of problems with his bow arm, and but there would be a phrase, a moment, a few moments of divine spark that never left him. That was something. He was obviously a marked human being for greatness. The other one, typical Haif, it's one of my favorite recordings. Listen to this, you will recognize. that's also, in my opinion, one of his greatest recordings. And there's certain certain pieces of the violin repertoire, even if I played for a while, I always left them because I think they belong to him. Because pieces like that, Havanaise by Saint-Saëns, Zigeunerweisen, there are certain encore pieces, his own transcriptions and things like that he played. Nobody comes close. Or Cornwall Concerto, which we will hear, certain pieces that were written for him. I mean, just the opening, it's unattainable, that kind of greatness. But it also, sets an almost impossible level of what a human being, like you and me, because I met him once, mostly just to see if he was made of the same material because I always, knowing his recordings, I thought he must be from a different galactic somehow. But no, he was the same, very difficult man, very demanding and set in his ways, and dogmatic in many ways, and very difficult, hardly had any friends. But you could forgive him a lot of things just because he was Jascha Heifetz. And it's interesting because when the great Leopold Auer, who produced so many great students, Misha Elman, Ephraim Zimbalist, Nathan Milstein, Miron Palyakin, and many, many others, whenever he was asked who his favorite or famous students, he always named other students, but not Heifetz. And they said, why you don't mention Jascha Heifetz? I said, well, he's really not my student. He's God's fiddler, which is true. And I know it also from encounters of people who were at those lessons, because I was lucky enough to talk to some of our students, like Richard Burgin, who was 42 years the concertmaster of Boston Symphony. He was older than Heifetz a little bit, and he sat on those lessons, and he told me that Heifetz's father, who always came with him, he was always complaining to the professor. He said, listen, he doesn't do what you told him at last lesson. He doesn't leave him alone. He never really insisted, because Heifetz had his way, and that was it, and he was incredibly self-critical. And I know for a fact that when it was like 60 years since his first recording or something like that, he was already not performing, and his producer, Jack Pfeiffer, said, Mr. Heifetz, we have this second Brahms sonata which you recorded but never released in the 30s. Why don't you include it now? I'm sure it's wonderful. The answer is very simple. It wasn't good then, it's not good now. The end of the story. No compromises. Brutally critical to himself and to the others as well. But you had to accept it because that's the standards he applied to the world, and that's why he was where he was. Now the other character, Fritz Kreisler, was pretty much the opposite. He was incredibly friendly and gracious. He had this Viennese charm which he carried all his life, even though he lived in the States and then in Europe and other places. He didn't really live. He grew up in Vienna, but he never really returned. He was rejected, actually, after already graduating at the age of 12 from Paris Conservatory. So he belonged, strictly speaking, to the Franco-Belgian school. He came to Vienna and tried to get a position in Vienna Philharmonic and was rejected. So he became a doctor. He's still playing violin for quite a while. And then during the First World War, he enlisted in the army as a doctor, and he was wounded. So he was there, and then after that, he started his career, and he was absolutely a household name all his life because he made his debut with Berlin Philharmonic when he was, I don't know, 13, 14, and then with Nikisch later on, and he was absolutely unchallenged god of violin. Heifetz moved everybody from the pedestal except Chrysler. Chrysler was never challenged, and Heifetz always had great respect because Chrysler was something else. Chrysler also was a wonderful composer, terrific pianist. He wrote string quartet, which I will play later on this list. He wrote operettas, number of operettas. He was all around incredibly accomplished musician. And let's hear him first. It's one of his original works, and he wrote, of course, a lot of transcriptions, called Gitan, Gypsy. Oh, no, sorry. That's the next one, this one. Hold on. What happened to the Gitan, La Gitana? Why does it not go? No. Okay, we'll come back to this because this is now, I don't know why it disappeared because I did have Gitan on the list. I have it here. Anyway, another quiz for you. Bach Adagio, G minor, played by three. I'm not telling you which one. Yeah, obviously it's missing something. Hold on a second. Why is it jumping from... Hold. It doesn't give me all the... Yeah, for instance. Okay, and let's try another one because it doesn't have all of those things, but I'll find it on YouTube in the meantime. What is this? This one? Yeah. Okay, and the third one, I found it on YouTube. Let's hear this one. So, who do you think played first, second, and last? Any guesses? No? No guesses? Tell me. Correct. Second? No, Chrysler you get no, but I think it's pretty easy to tell that the last one was Chrysler, which is a surprise that I was able to find when I was compiling that list, that Chrysler also, we don't know any recordings of Chrysler of Bach, sonatas and partitas, any of them. Menon made several recordings, Heifetz did too, but Chrysler, it's a very beautiful, so now you could say maybe old-fashioned, but it's extremely poised and noble version. So there's many ways of playing Baroque music. You know, now when they almost expect you to play imitating the Baroque instruments if you don't play them anyway, and non-vibrato, and the whole thing is just stripping away all the so-called the performance practice. But performance practice is a different thing. There were plenty of bad performances in the very romantic era, but there are also fantastic performances, which really goes to the spirit of the music, not so much the form, it's the essence. He conveys the beauty and poetry of that adagio, like very few that I've heard. My preferred version is Chrysler of the three. It's interesting how, so now, these three giants, of course, they had various partners. You know, Menon, of course, in terms of conductors, they all played with great conductors. But it's interesting to see how they performed, what piano partners they found. And this is indicative of, in Chrysler's case, it's a very special alliance that he had with the greatest pianist, probably of the century, Rachmaninoff. And he recorded 3 sonatas with him. Interestingly, not Brahms, but Grieg number 3, which is a fantastic recording. And also Beethoven number 8. And they played together at Carnegie Hall, and it was always, two greatest performers of the century playing together. So his piano partner was at least on his level, if not high. Now, Heifetz usually played with one of his favorite accompanists. It was either Brooks Smith or the other's name was Emanuel Bey. And most of the recordings are with those. Menuhin played very often with his sister, who was a marvelous, marvelous pianist. And here's beginning of the G major sonata played by Menuhin and Hefziba Menuhin. and so forth, yeah? And let's hear Chrysler with Rachmaninoff, the Schubert duo. The beginning is something special from Rachmaninoff. So, they also, of course, were great dedicatees of great concertos. I will play you the opening of the Korngold concerto, which was written for Heifetz. That's quite something. And since, you know, because of the circumstances of so much immigration at the beginning of the century, from Russian Revolution, from Nazis in Germany, so many great talents moved to America, and Hollywood especially became, and that's where Heifetz lived, the home of great European composers, and they started writing for movies. Korngold, Miklos Rocha, and then many others, Bernard Herrmann, and the rest of them. So also Los Angeles became the home for two most influential composers of the time, which was Stravinsky and Schoenberg. And so Korngold wrote an extraordinary concerto for Jascha Heifetz, but by that time he wrote already so many famous films he couldn't shake off the movies. And his last movement is the exactly version of his music for Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, the great star of that time. But the beginning is quite extraordinary. It's one of my favorite. What an opening, huh? Oh, concerto. It's quite something. Now, Elgar Concerto was written and dedicated for Chrysler, but he never recorded it. And he only did the premiere, and somehow he must have not felt that it was his piece. And there were others who became associated with that piece. And of course, at the age of 16, Menon came to London and played for Elgar for about 10 minutes before they made a recording, the famous recording with Elgar conducting. And Elgar just heard about 10 minutes of him. He said, "That's fine. See you tomorrow. I'm off to the races." because he loved horse races. And what became a great recording of 16-year-old Menuhin, I will play, the second movement of it, a little bit of the second movement. And I have a direct connection to that because many years later, Elgar was long gone, of course. Menuhin was already at the age of Elgar, and he wanted to make another recording now as a conductor. And he chose me as a soloist, so I recorded Elgar with Menuhin conducting. So I have a special connection to Menuhin, Elgar, and also Chrysler, because it was originally written for Chrysler. So here's the second movement. Now, I would like to tell you a story about Chrysler, because he was perhaps the greatest transcriber and imitator of the 20th century. Because what he did, he played a long time trick on his audience and his colleagues and everything. He said that he went, the beginning of the 20th century, he discovered in the French chateau a chest of manuscripts, old manuscripts. There was Pugnani, Tartini, Porpora, Dardini, and this and that, and this and that. And this. And so all he did was just dress them up, and he would play Pugnani, Chrysler, Prelude and Allegro, and Tartini variations on Corelli's theme, and all of that. And he played like that in concerts many years. And then at some point, the secret came out that he never did find that treasure. It was all made up. He composed them in the style. So he was a great forger, a creative forger. He could go into the style of Tartini and create something you'd believe it was written by Tartini. And he would just give it, a wonderful wrapping. And here is a very interesting piece which I love. I've played it many times as encores, or I used to have programs also, homage to Chrysler or Art of Transcriptions, because I absolutely adore his transcriptions. And being now so much in transcription world, have tremendous respect for him and for Heifetz, because Heifetz also made a wonderful transcription. But Kreisler especially. There is a piece by Beethoven, rather uninteresting, rather square. Not everything that Beethoven wrote was made of gold. No. There was some real clunkers, as they say. And this piece was one of them. And it's Rondino. And if you take the original for piano, you'd think, really not that interesting. What Kreisler does with it is extraordinary. Because the middle part, the minor part, you will hear it. It takes 3 minutes. If you never played it, I seriously recommend for you to get the music and study it, because it's absolute jewel. And what Kreisler could do also, for instance, with the Beethoven Concerto, where his cadenza combines 2 themes, which is a total stroke of genius. So at that point, he elevated himself to the greatest geniuses of music world. This is Rondino on the theme of Beethoven, as he says. I hope it goes. Yeah. Totally his now. A total jewel, yeah, from the execution. Just he takes a theme of rather uninteresting piece by Beethoven and makes it into something, a very precious stone. So this is the great mastery of those giants. And that was certainly the golden age of violin. Of course, they did do a lot of things, and they collaborated with some of the greatest colleagues of them. Heifetz played famously with his close friend. There was one of his very few friends and colleagues that he really respected, and he liked to play with him. That was Pятигорский. And for instance, this is just a little bit of a Passacaglia by Handel. Sorry. And so forth. Now I will play you just the second movement, a part of the second movement of Chrysler's String Quartet, which I understand Irina Kivorko, who is here, just performed for the first time in Ljubljana with her quartet just last year, right? Yeah. Just last year. So here it is with Chrysler playing. This would be really appropriate, yeah? So forth. Violist here is William Primrose, arguably the greatest violist who's ever lived. And now at the end, because I'd like to get some of your questions, if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, impressions on what we do. But let's finish on a very special lighter note, because Menuhin, who had an interesting collaboration with Ravi Shankar, for instance, and he was very much into the Indian music. But then at some point he did something which made his recordings with this extraordinary jazz violinist, Stefan Grappelli. And they made 3 wonderful albums. And I could always tell who is who, because Grappelli, Menuhin told me that Grappelli never repeated himself. He never used, of course, the music, it was all from him. But all the part of Menuhin was written out because, most of us were not trained to improvise. We're trained to play exactly what's written in the music, and Menuhin was one of them. So this is a wonderful piece from Cole Porter. Just one of those things. Yeah. That's Grappelli, clearly. That's many.